Can you close the door so we're not losing all our cold air? I want it a little bit closer.
See, now it sits flat.
Let's see. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay.
And do you like the wraps?
I do. I think that's fantastic. It's probably simpler than you trying to just cut down the other one, or did you use the same?
It's the one you gave me.
Oh, nice.
But I just used parts of it and I just pop riveted
Oh,
aluminum.
and you added, so did you add a framing to it to make it a little sturdier?
I did.
Because those look new.
I did. All around here.
Yeah.
So it has something to sit on, so it wasn't bending these at all.
Yeah. Go team. Wait, don't leave. I'm filming you.
Oh, you're filming?
We were filming that conversation.
Oh, we were?
We have B-roll now. I'll try and have me
Hey
look
all,
like
it's the Honeydew Carpenter. I'm just returning Julie's
my magic.
oven. She's been missing it. It worked great. I took it up to the ATC to show it to Paul Wheaton, and he was very impressed by it.
He should be. It's a beautiful stove.
It is, and it works wonderful. In fact, last night I cooked a pizza in it. I was telling Julie, you need to scrub the...
I need to scrub it, and I need to go get the pizza stone too.
Yeah, I think the stone...
Did you guys try it with the stone?
We didn't. But yeah, we need to put a stone in there.
I think it would make a difference.
I put a on the door. It's about 1.25 inches thick of aircrete. I put a handle, and then I put a thermometer on it.
Which I'm super excited about.
A thermometer on it. But
because I've been filling it just with my hand. I've gotten pretty good at adjusting it according to what I'm cooking. But it would be really nice to like have scientific, like actual numbers to put down instead of just kind of...
And the great thing about this is I built a base for it, kind of custom for Julie's rocket mass heater. And she can just set this base over the top of her downdraft. And in the wintertime she can cook inside of her off-grid cabin. And then when it's too hot to run your stove inside during the summer, she just brings it out here and puts it on her camp chef and does it with... and so this is an oven that's beautiful. It's... I think most anybody would be proud to have it on their back deck, you know. And you can put it on top of a camp chef, or you could just set it on top of a grill. I mean...
Even an open fire if you had to, if it was what you had.
Even an open fire. Yeah.
So, if I use it on the rocket mass heater, the really nice thing is that it actually captures the heat. I have to open it up and let all the heat go directly out the chimney in order for it to get hot enough to bake with. But instead of the cabin getting too warm, the oven itself captures all that heat. It goes into the aircrete, and instead of then having too much warmth, it actually cools the cabin down just a little bit.
And what I found is if you turn it up pretty good, it'll temperature right up to 400 degrees within a minute or two.
Yeah, it does. But it's nice when the aircrete warms up.
But exactly. I was just going to mention that because it was the first time I had used it. Julie asked me to build it for her, and I built it and brought it out. I never got to use it. And we didn't have a temperature gauge in it, and now I do. And so what I did the following day when I cooked the pizza for myself was I let it preheat for like 10-15 minutes until the aircrete was all warm all the way around, and oh my goodness, it just did the crust, the golden brown. And it's
fast. It's a fast bake.
Yeah, but the aircrete in it is about 1.5 inches thick all the way around, and so it does act as a heat sink.
It does.
And it is going to draw the heat out. So even though it's, say, preheated and the temperature gauge shows 400, if you turn that down to keep it 400 in there, instead of the temperature climbing, there's a happy medium there. And so there's a little bit of
playing with it
to understand that happy medium where the heat is being synced into the aircrete and the additional heat is being added to it. on the base, it has holes along the inside that allows you to open this flue and the heat to flue up around. And what I found fascinating is when it's preheating, you could feel this heat, and it's not that hot, even though you know it's super hot down there going up. So that energy is not being wasted. It's being synced right into the aircrete, and you can tell as it gets hotter, hotter, and hotter, as the aircrete gets hotter and hotter, and that heat has no place to sink into and no place to go.
It starts to come out the top instead.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a neat little deal. I really believe that if you just set it out there and got all the aircrete heated up to like 400 degrees, you could probably just turn the heat off to it and stick a pizza in and cook it.
I think you could.
You know.
I think you could.
Yeah. Julie had us out here for dinner. We cooked brownies in it a few weeks ago, and we had it running for a while, and you did too.
And it stayed hot for 2 hours.
And it stayed hot for way long after that. And so that's the fascinating thing about aircrete. And actually, Paul was asking me to, because I overcame that 2-foot drop down into your bench and a lot of things that were just completely unconventional with rocket mass heaters, and he was asking me to explain how that works.
Right.
And it's basically just physics. It doesn't matter whether it's a gas or whether it's an object. Something in motion tends to want to stay in motion. And whatever amount of energy it has behind it, it has behind it. It's similar to gravity. Gravity is an energy, and when you jump, after moving 5 feet, you're at a certain velocity, and after moving 10, you're at a certain velocity, and they say right around 16, 17 feet, you're at full velocity. Because, you know, but if you, say, put something in there to restrict it, like a parachute, then all of a sudden you slow way down. And that's what was happening on 1.0 with your stovepipe. It was like the same philosophy behind a river that's running into a lake. It's running really fast, and it hits the lake, and it slows way down, and it slowly moves across the lake. And then when it goes to the outlet of the lake, it speeds right up again. And in that instance, with your stovepipe, the atmosphere out here is like the big ocean or big lake. And when that hot air, hit the cold air there, it radiated out through there. The energy was lost, and so its momentum was lost, and it was slowing way down, just similar to you know, where now, because the way the physical properties of aircrete, okay, it goes in and it has a dam that holds the heat in, but it also heat sinks in and holds the heat, and therefore, because it stays warm even after the fire, and maybe that energy, the built up energy in there, the stovepipe acts like a battery, and even as the stove is slowing down, it still pulls, doesn't it?
Right, it does.
The energy isn't leaving, and so instead of going up one section of pipe and cooling off a certain amount and slowing down, it's not cooling off.
Right.
It's actually getting hotter and hotter, and so it's accelerating. That's why I call it my hot air vacuum.
It is. If you guys haven't seen that video, the chimney was what made the rocket mass heater work, because it does have to drop feet. It's dropping feet down into that bench in order to go through, and it's a cold bench.
And every other, this just went against all conventional wisdom when it came to rocket mass stoves, right?
Yeah.
The 2% rise, you remember?
Yeah,
you were
and
like,
I was like, Darwin, it's not going to work. Paul says it has to have a 2% rise, and you're like, no, it'll work. We're going to figure this out.
well,
and we don't.
I did. I studied physics. You know, I actually looked at physics equations, and I was like, mathematically, it's going to work.
Right.
It's going to work if my theory about the physical properties of aircrete are true, meaning see, you can take a double wall stovepipe that has ceramic insulation in it.
Yeah.
Ceramic insulation does not absorb and hold heat. It just is a dam. It's not meant to do that.
And we melted it. For our 1.0, our chimney 1.0, when we tried to insulate it, burned up and melted because it got too hot, but it also didn't hold the heat well enough the chimney didn't work.
Right.
Just having air in there didn't work. It was not
I
insulated.
double walled it
Yeah.
with just an air dam. That didn't work.
It was too cold outside and too warm inside, and everything was back puffing back in, and we had liquid creosote leaking out of everything.
And speaking of
It was a
that,
mess.
when I took I actually set up a demonstration for the ATC, and I took some sections of Julie so kindly said, yeah, you can take my stovepipe. And I came out here.
Well, it's July.
Yeah,
We
it's
don't
July.
need it very bad.
She's not using it. But when I took those down, you stick your finger in and it turns
They're
brown. They're clean. It's just a little bit of surface rust.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is her stove is burning so efficient that
Yeah.
it burns all the carbon. And there is no carbon to go up. And all there is a vapor.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, it's not going to last forever and ever. I don't know how many years it'll last, probably a lot of years, because that vapor does create a surface rust on the stovepipe. But it was funny, I put my thumb in and pulled it out, and it wasn't even as black as my finger got right there when I was handling the bottom side of this that had propane burning on it.
And our
you
first
know?
burn, we did have creosote in it. Not a lot of creosote, but we did have creosote that had built up. There was
Right.
some.
Yeah.
There was some.
Well, it was. Do you remember when we first pulled it off and all that fell out? I mean, it had built up in there.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a short amount of time that
It
we
wasn't
ran
very
it.
long,
So
yeah.
if you ran it for a long period of time, it would have just built up more and more. And the stovepipe eliminated that.
And we burned it a lot longer this time than we did the first time. The first time we did it, we only did it for like a week, maybe a week and a half.
A week and a half.
This time I had been running it since March.
And it didn't work. And that's the
And
thing.
this time it worked though. March till July. That's how long we burned it.
I was at dinner with Paul Wheaton, and he says, okay, look me in the eye and be honest. Does Julie call you asking you, you know, what do I tweak to make it work and this and that? And I was like, well, after a couple months, she called me in tears, crying, just saying she felt so blessed to have a stove that worked so well. But
it was amazing.
But that's all that she's called me about.
Well, especially once we got the oven onto it, because it actually helped to have the oven on it, because when it would get too warm in the cabin, I could just put something in the oven to bake and it would pull the heat out of the cabin and into it. It just, because of the different way that I had to run it to use the oven, it actually would cool it down. So if I had a warmer day, it was a good day to bake.
Right.
Because the air-cooled in the oven also helped to act as a heat sink.
And I understand all the theories behind the downdraft and the heat riser on a rocket mass stove. And there were a lot of people telling me that you can't put a mass around the downdraft, that you have to put a fins on it so it radiates out really fast, and then that heat exchange is what makes the hot air coming up easily flow up through the riser and push the cooler air down. And I
like it with the pea gravel.
I like it with the pea gravel. For one, it does absorb a lot of the energy. And you're talking in the vortex, you know, I know it's over 1200 degrees because it melts out aluminum,
right?
Right? So it's at least 1220 degrees, but it's actually hotter than that in the vortex, you know, where it's getting the additional oxygen in. The only thing I would change about our stove right now is I want to put a ring around with holes in it that you can just swivel it and shut those off and put, because I know at night, especially with my stovepipe, the stovepipe stays warm for a long time. It's going to continue to flue air and suck your hot air, suck all your warm air out of the cabin, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's only 3/8 inch holes, so it's not a substantial amount. And the stove is really oversized for your cabin, so it's not a significant deal right here.
Do you think you could make a smaller one? Do you think it's possible to make a smaller one? Would it still be as efficient?
Paul said the reason it worked was because it was a 4-inch system. And that they traditionally run a little cooler, you know, than the 6 and 8-inch systems, which he said they're running at 2,000-3,000 degrees. And I don't know how you measure that, but I don't doubt that they. I don't
More
doubt that they
oxygen.
would, because
Right.
he's got them insulated with ceramic insulation, and all it is a fuel air mixture.
Right.
I mean, you get your fuel air mixture right, you're going to get the heat. That's all there is to it. But at the same time, if you look at all the gases that would, during the gasification process, where you're burning out and gassing off your wood or your carbon substance, I don't know of any gas that the flash point of it is above 1200 degrees.
Right.
Right? And so you can get them to run hotter and faster, and I think the only reason you'd want them to run hotter is so that they would flue faster. But
Right. But it's like,
but it's like gravity.
Yeah.
It's like gravity. You're only going to fall so fast. It's like 126 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to shoot up through that riser slower than if it's 2,000 degrees? I don't know.
I don't know.
I
In
really
a practical
don't.
application, I'm not sure it matters, does it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that 1,200 degrees is plenty to get your full velocity, is what I'm saying. It's like, so, I looked at different theories
Right.
mathematically of gravity and the laws of motion and, Newton's laws and stuff to try and determine why this whole thing worked.
3.0 is going to be awesome. Mine is awesome,
Well,
but 3.0 is going to be awesome.
And that's the thing. I am doing a 3.0.
Right.
Right? And I want it to be, yours has a metal burn box in it. And people were like, get ready for warping and this and that and everything else. Of course, I knew there was going to be none of that. And there was none of that.
None of that. It's
Right?
just fine.
The reason you get warping in, like, remember the steel on the Yukon stove I lent you? How it would warp and you would get that, what they call oil canning? That happens because on the inside, it's super hot. And on the outside where it's radiating, it's a lot cooler. And so you have expansion and contraction differentials there. And you end up getting the warping and the oil canning. But when you have 3 inches of aircrete around that steel, it all heats up at the same rate, and then that heat sink of the aircrete holds a lot of heat, and it slowly cools it all down at the same rate. So there's not that huge differential. You get no warping. So, and that's another thing. Paul was like, well, at 1600 degrees, steel starts to spall. Right. But if we're running your system around between 12 and it's not getting upwards of 1600 degrees until it goes through the exhaust and up into the vortex where there is no steel,
Right.
it's fine and it
Right.
works great, and I haven't seen any spalling on your batch box.
Yeah.
And so 3.0, I'm still considering doing a batch box that is steel in it, just as a wear surface. Because, like, towards the back of Julie's stove, the only part of the aircrete is not a good wear surface.
Right.
It's just not.
Well, because things bump against it, and
Right.
it's really hard on it. It'll crumble,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't fall apart. It just
Yeah, it'll just
Wear it off a little
slowly
bit.
wear it off and crumble it off. And that's the only place I've seen any deterioration in her stove is
Yeah.
toward the back where the exhaust portal goes out.
yeah. And it's because
And-
I've hit it with wood a couple times.
Yeah, and I originally came up with the theory of your smooth, just perfect exhaust portal because of my experience in racing motors and where we would take 2-stroke motors on my snowmobiles and pipe them and port them. And if you ever looked inside of a motor, when they cast it, there's these little ribs by where they cast it, and as air flows through, it hits those ribs and it spins and it creates turbulence and it creates a resistance. It's a friction loss type
Right.
thing. And so we've kind of eliminated that friction loss through Julie's system as well. And so it was interesting to go up and look at all the different rocket stoves that they had. you know, and of course they are all traditional ones, these huge brick and heavy conglomerations, something that you could not have where you're not on a foundation and you just have a wood floor. And so, you know, I came up with what I came up with, and it worked, and it's really surprised a lot of people that it worked. Because I had some guy comment, he said he was binge watching all my videos on rocket stove heaters, and he goes, "Are you sure you read the book? Because you're not following the rules."
But
and I'm like,
it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's an amazing stove.
So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a fun journey working with Julie on these projects. We got the heating going.
Yep. And the
cooking going, and
now
you know, Julie's always been big on, she's going, if you can do creature comforts for off-grid, you're gonna kill it on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, if you can do creature comforts.
Especially inexpensive and pretty at the same time.
And so now, what I'm building her is an air conditioner.
Yep.
Okay? It's a solar, low-powered, low-watt, low-voltage AC system. Now, her cabin is only like a few hundred square feet, so there's not a lot to cool. And I'm designing the system for this cabin specifically right now. But it's going to be a mobile unit that you could just, if you had a shop or an outbuilding, you could just stick it out there. And it could be on-grid or off-grid.
Yeah.
Because the components that I'm using for it can be run with a AC adapter or the low voltage adapter as well. And so it's going to be a really cool unit. So we'll have, as far as creature comforts go, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and cooking.
Yeah. Which is really the
you know,
more you
all
can
off
do that,
grid.
the more you can save on your fuel, the less you have to think about, okay, I've got to prep for 3 hours before I can cook anything because this oven takes forever, or I can't lift it. It has to stay where it is. This I can lift.
Yeah, this oven weighs about, what, 15, 16
Yeah, it's not
pounds?
heavy.
It's not heavy. I mean, the door is aircrete. It's not heavy.
It's super simple. The rocket stove is amazing because in our tiny house we need to be able to really control how quickly the heat comes in and how quickly it goes out, and just keep it really low because we sleep in the attic, and if it gets too hot, if we have too much heat come out, it's miserable to sleep in the attic.
And guys, just so you know, we're in Idaho. We're just a little bit south of the Tetons, the Rocky Mountains.
It gets cold.
And so it has only been, I think we got our first 90-degree day like a week and a half ago, you know.
We were in the 60s. We were in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, and at night it was getting too chilly for them out here. They were having to run their stove like 2 weeks ago.
We were.
You know?
Day and night.
So that time when we when Julie invited Mrs. Honeydew and I out to have dinner that one day, she had the stove going, and it was just like this, just like wrap you in a blanket type
and you
of
lay
warmth.
down on the bench, you're like, oh, this is so nice. That's what everybody says
Right.
when they come to cabin. Oh, I could just take a nap in here. It's so cozy.
And what's funny is she had been running it for quite a while, so and the bench, she has a foam pad on it, and I stuck my hand under there, and it was just
like bath water. It's like bath water temperature.
It's hard to explain. It radiates out of that pea gravel, and I never spent the night here or anything, but from what Julie tells me, it continues to do that for hours and hours.
It does all night.
After the stove shuts
down.
About
10 hours. I get heat out of it for about 10 hours, and the stove itself keeps radiating. The pea gravel around the heat riser keeps radiating.
I remember when we first put 2.0 in, she called me the next morning. She's like, oh, the temperature in the cabin was 74 degrees this morning, and I haven't run it for 8 hours or whatever. It was crazy.
It was amazing, because it was still cold. It was still...
it was still below freezing cold.
Yeah, it was very, very cold.
At that time. Yeah, it was still below freezing.
And we might have even slept with the windows open a little bit, too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we really put it to the test.
So it's been fun, and we're just moving on and gonna do all the creature comforts.
Yeah.
You know, the heating, the ventilation, the AC. Paul Wheaton had some great examples of solar food dryers and stuff. It's actually amazing how comfortable you can live.
Yeah. Without power.
Without
none of these
power.
things are powered.
Yeah, none of these things are powered.
Yeah.
And so.
So Darwin is putting together a Kickstarter to be able to offer plans and hopefully a shippable oven, a shippable air conditioner, to where he would include his tool, the Foamate, which makes the aircrete, as well as the metal. This one is made out of aluminum. Is the air conditioner going to be aluminum as well?
The air conditioner is going to be in a plastic barrel.
Nice.
So it's going to be real portable.
So there's going to be very little that needs to be shipped.
Very little. It's going to be in a plastic barrel, and all there's going to be is small forms for making your... it's going to be... The mix design for the air conditioner is going to be pretty aerated, because you're not going to want a real dense aircrete in there. You're going to want water to be able to flow through it really well, and it's going to be all kind of contained. So the only thing there's going to be as far as shipping is the forms for pouring the aircrete blocks that will go inside in a certain configuration inside the barrel, and then there's going to be a PDF of where to cut holes in the barrel and where to put your fan to put stuff through, and how to put your low voltage electrical bilge pump in the bottom to circulate water through the aircrete as you're creating this. And it's all done. The bilge pump is 3.6 watts. So it's tiny. A very small solar panel could run this air conditioner. So I think, and the 10-inch fan that moves the air through it, which is a good size fan. It's probably going to be a little oversized for your cabin. It might freeze you out a little bit. But typically swamp coolers or the theory behind how this one is going to work will only create about a 25 to 28 degree differential between what the ambient temperature is going in and outside. And so this is going to be a big deal, I think.
Yeah, and it will matter what your mix is.
Yeah.
The mix also comes with the PDF.
Right,
so
there'll be a mix. It'll be one that you'll have to aerate pretty good. You know. If you've ever watched any of my lives, and I've showed you examples when I was trying to just go through different mix designs, and I showed you some really aerated ones, it's going to be a really aerated one. It's not meant to be structural or anything like that. It's just meant to be an element that's a good conductor of water. And water wicks into it really well when it's really aerated. It's going to be a pretty cool air conditioner.
Yeah.
So
I am super excited. Make sure to go check out the Honeydew Carpenter. They will be doing their Kickstarter here very quickly, and the prices will be a little bit lower on the Kickstarter than what they'll be on the Etsy store afterwards. Yeah. He's trying to get an assembly line type of a thing going. Up to this point, the only thing he has shipped has been the Foamate, but he's really, really working on trying to get the actual cut pieces together to ship to people who want something simpler. And so that's why they're doing the Kickstarters, to be able to get some of these other products out. And so make sure to support that. Make sure to go subscribe to their channel. They're bringing out amazing things all the time. And we'll talk to you later.
To fix it, and it worked great, because I ran these bottom two were subject to at least 1600 degrees for hours, and they held up great. And so I don't think your stove is gonna fall apart, right? And if it did,
it's okay, we'd all die.
No.
Oh God.
The stove would just quit working.
Right? And see, that's the thing, is when you do some of these DIY projects where you really don't know your stuff, it would be nice to have somebody who could say, your stove isn't going to explode and it's not going to melt. It'll just stop working. And that way the mama in me, he's like, I like to sleep soundly at night. I don't want to have one ear open. Because on most wood stoves, you have to have an ear open just a little bit at night with the wood stove. And so having somebody who really knows what he's talking about, knows the math and can say, it'll just stop working. It won't catch fire. It won't melt. It'll just stop working. Makes me feel a lot better.
Awesome. I'm glad you feel better.
It's a huge amount. I mean, you think about it.
No,
it's a huge
it
amount of
is.
trust. I got 2 little kids in that cabin, and I'm the stupid one who's doing all this experimentation with the tiny living. I'm really doing some things that most people don't do, and so this is one of the biggest experiments we've done so far, and I think it's the only one I've done where I was a little bit worried to start with.
She was.
I was really worried.
Oh yeah, she was. She would call me and.
Are you sure it's not going to melt?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's not going to melt?
Is this pulling all the oxygen out of our house?
Right? Just a little, a lot of people think I'm an irresponsible parent because of some of the adventures my family has. But really, when I feel like it comes down to the safety of my kids, I would rather know that it was something that was tried and true. Darwin took a lot more time on this than he probably had to, as far as making it really thorough. And so, one other thing is that John really wants to live in a monolithic dome. So the fact that Darwin put together this foam mate, and you said you can even make one bigger.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to. Go grab the well mate tank. And this is another thing I sourced for free, and I know where I could get 100 of them. So I'm going to do a sourcing video about these as well. But instead of using that little ABS and PVC tank as the tank, I'm just going to plumb it into this, and so I can do bigger projects.